God knows everything, why did he let Satan fall? Forget the horns, forget the red skin, the pitchfork, the cartoon villain you grew up with. None of that is in the Bible, and none of it is what we're talking about today. Go back further than that. Go back before there was a single tear in the whole of creation, before the word evil meant anything at all, before there was a death, a lie, a broken promise, or a funeral anywhere in the universe. Now picture a being standing in a place of pure light. He is, according to the Bible, the most beautiful thing God ever made. Not a man, not a monster. The brightest, wisest, highest creature in the entire created order. Close enough to the throne of God to feel the heat of it. And there is one phrase the Bible uses for him that I want you to hold on to because it's going to come back, and it is not going to mean what you think it means. God calls him the seal of perfection. Remember that phrase, because here's the question that probably brought you to this video. And it is one of the oldest, hardest questions a thinking person can ask. If God knows everything before it happens, if he is never surprised, never caught off guard, never scrambling to fix a mistake, then he knew this perfect, beautiful being would one day rebel. He saw the whole thing coming, every second of it. So why did he make him anyway? And I want to be careful here, because most people ask the wrong version of that question. They ask, why couldn't God stop it? As if the all-powerful maker of galaxies somehow fumbled the ball. That's not the real question. The real question is much stranger and much deeper. Why would a God who saw it all coming deliberately build a universe where rebellion was even possible? This is not a story about a monster. This is not a story about a talking snake in a garden. This is not a story about a villain who was evil from the start. This is a story about the most beautiful thing God ever made, and the single choice that cracked the foundations of the world. Stay with me, because the answer is going to tell you something about yourself you may have never considered. Let's start with what he was before, because you can't understand the fall until you understand the height he fell from. There's a passage in the book of Ezekiel that on the surface is addressed to the king of the ancient city of Tyre. But the language climbs so far past any human king, the Christians have read it for centuries as a window into the being behind the throne. And the description is staggering. He was full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. He had been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was his covering. He was, in the words of that text, the anointed cherub, a guardian standing at the very center of God's holy mountain. And then comes the phrase I asked you to hold on to. He was the seal of perfection. The Hebrew there is chotam toknit, and it means something like the finished sum, the final stamp pressed onto a masterpiece to say, this is complete, this is flawless, there is nothing left to add. That was him. Not a rough draft. Not a flawed prototype that slipped past quality control. The seal of perfection. He even has a name that captures it. The Hebrew word is Hallel, the shining one, the morning star. When the Latin translators reached for a word, they chose Lucifer, the light bearer. So here's what most people miss. The being who became darkness was made to carry light. He wasn't created broken. He wasn't designed to fail. There was nothing in his blueprint that pointed toward rebellion, which makes what happened next so much harder to explain, and so much more important to understand. Because something turned, there's another passage, this one in Isaiah, that gives you the inside of that turn. And it's not loud, it's not a battle, it's 5 quiet sentences spoken in the heart. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Read those again and notice what they all have in common. I will, I will, I will. 5 times. The most beautiful creature in existence looks away from the God who made him and toward himself. And the sin that started the entire history of evil wasn't murder. It wasn't theft. It was pride. The first letter to Timothy actually warns young leaders about this exact thing. Being lifted up with pride and falling into the same condemnation as the devil. Pride was the door, everything else walked through it. But here's where you have to slow down, because this is the part that trips people up. If God saw all of this coming, every I will, the whole slow inward collapse, then doesn't that make God responsible? Didn't he, in a sense, set it up? And everything turns on a single distinction. There is a difference between causing something and permitting something. Those are not the same act. They are not even close. Think about the book of Job for a second. When disaster falls on Job's life, the Bible is careful to show you exactly how it happens. The adversary appears before God's throne and has to ask permission. He can't move until God allows it. God doesn't reach down and ruin Job's life with his own hand. He permits it, and he sets limits on it. Permission and authorship are 2 different things, and the whole problem of evil starts to look different the moment you stop confusing them. God did not put the I will in Lucifer's heart. He did something far more mysterious and far more telling. He made a being capable of saying it, and that he let him say it. And that single decision opens up the biggest question of all. Not, why did God allow it? But, what kind of universe was God trying to build? That this had to be on the table at all. But it gets stranger, because the answer isn't really about Lucifer at all. It's about you, real quick, before we go deeper, because the next part is the part that changed how I think about all of this. If you're still watching this far in, you're exactly the kind of person these videos are made for. So do me one small favor. Hit subscribe and drop a single word in the comments. The word permitted. It tells me you caught the difference we just talked about, and it helps more people find this. That's it. Let's keep going. So if God didn't cause the rebellion and only permitted it, that just pushes the question back one step. Why permit it at all? Why build a creature who could fall? For the answer, I want to bring in 2 of the sharpest minds the church ever produced, separated by 700 years, both circling the exact question you're asking right now. The first is Augustine, writing in North Africa around the year 400. Augustine wrestled with this harder than almost anyone, and he landed on something brilliant. Evil, he said, is not a thing. God never made a substance called evil and set it on a shelf. Evil is a privation, a good thing bent away from what it was made for. Darkness isn't a thing you create. It's what's left when light leaves. Cold isn't a substance, it's the absence of heat. And evil, Augustine said, is the absence of a good that should be there. Lucifer's rebellion didn't add something new to the universe. It subtracted. He took a will made to love God and curved it back on himself, which means God never made evil. He made a good being with a good will, and that good will is the very thing that turned. But that raises the obvious follow-up. Then why give him a will that could turn? And here's the second mind. Anselm of Canterbury, around the year 1090, wrote an entire book on this, with a title that gets right to it, The Fall of the Devil. And Anselm's insight is one of those things that sounds simple until it detonates in your head. A will that cannot say no, cannot say a real yes. Sit with that for a second. If God had made Lucifer incapable of rebellion, hardwired, locked, no other option, then Lucifer's worship would have been worth exactly nothing. It would be the love of a wind-up toy. A river doesn't choose to flow downhill. A thermostat doesn't love 72 degrees. For the worship of an angel to mean anything, absurdo. For it to be love at all, refusal had to be genuinely on the table. And here's the proof that the freedom was real, not a trap God rigged to fail, because not everyone fell. There's a scene late in the Bible, in Revelation, of a war in heaven. And on the other side of that war stands another mighty being, the Archangel Michael, leading the angels who stayed. Same throne room, same God, same dazzling freedom that Lucifer had. And Michael used it to bow instead of climb. The Bible even says a third of the angels fell with Lucifer. Do the math on that. 2/3 didn't. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this whole question, because it means the fall was never inevitable. It wasn't a flaw baked into the system. The same gift handed to the same kind of creature in the same presence of the same God produced two completely different answers. One reached for the throne, the other guarded it. The freedom was real, the choice was real, and the responsibility, every ounce of it, landed on the one who chose to fall. So let's name plainly what God was actually doing. He was not building a museum of perfect statues that could never disappoint him. He was not assembling an army of robots programmed to salute. He was not writing a script and forcing every actor to read their lines. He was doing something far riskier and far more beautiful. He was making persons real ones, with real wills, capable of real love. And you cannot make a creature capable of love without making a creature capable of walking away. Now watch what happens next. Because that risk, the one God took with the angel, is the exact same risk he took when he made you. So let's go back to that phrase. The one I asked you to hold on to at the very beginning. The seal of perfection. Here's what it does not mean. It does not mean God made a mistake and slapped a perfect label on a flawed product. It does not mean the perfection was a lie. The seal was real. He really was flawless in his making. There was nothing wrong with the design, and that is the most unsettling truth in this entire question. The flaw was never in the design. A being can be perfectly made, wise, beautiful, radiant, the finished masterpiece of God, and still be free to ruin himself, because perfection of being and perfection of choosing are two different things. God gave him the first as a gift. The second, he could only ever offer, because a choice you're forced to make isn't a choice at all. The being the Bible later calls diabolos, Greek for the slanderer, the accuser, did not become evil because God botched him. He became evil because he was free, and he used that freedom to turn a perfect yes into an eternal no. Now let me bring this all the way down to where you live, because this stopped being abstract for me the day I thought about it like this. Imagine you have a child, and imagine you were offered a device, a small chip placed in that child's mind that would guarantee they could never lie to you, never disobey, never break your heart, never one day pack a bag and walk out the door. They would smile when you walked in. They would say, "I love you" on cue every time, forever. Would you do it? I don't think you would. And I think you already know why. Because the moment you installed that chip, you would lose the one thing you actually wanted. You don't want a child who can't leave. You want a child who can and stays anyway. You want the "I love you" to be chosen, not extracted. The second you make it impossible to walk away, you haven't secured their love. You've erased it. You'd be left holding a puppet that wears your child's face. That is the whole thing. That is the answer to the question that brought you here. God could have made a universe with a chip in it, a universe where rebellion was impossible, where every angel and every human was locked into worship, where no one could ever fall because no one could ever choose. And it would have been a universe with no evil in it at all, and no love in it either. Just motion, just compliance, just a very large, very quiet machine, performing affection it could never mean. He chose the other universe, the riskier one, the one where the seal of perfection could turn, where a third of the angels could fall, where the very first humans could reach for the very same forbidden thing. I will be like the Most High. He chose the universe where love was possible, knowing, fully knowing, before a single star was lit, exactly what that possibility would cost him. And here's the part nobody tells you. The price tag for that decision didn't land on us. It landed on him. Because the same God who permitted the fall is the same God who, the moment it happened, set in motion a plan to climb down into the wreckage himself. The freedom that let Lucifer say, "I will ascend," is the same freedom that let a carpenter from Nazareth say, in a garden, soaked in sweat like blood, "Not my will, but yours." One creature used his freedom to grab at God's throne. God used his own freedom to give his throne up. Same gift, opposite direction. And the entire weight of the universe hangs on which way you point it. So no, God didn't fail when Satan fell. God did the bravest thing imaginable. He made something that could break his heart. Because that was the only way to make something that could truly love him back. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of here. The first is the one that untangles the whole knot. God permitted the fall. He did not author it. Those are not the same act. And almost everyone who struggles with this question is quietly confusing the two. A father who hands his son the car keys is not the one driving when the son chooses recklessly. God allowed the possibility. Lucifer supplied the choice. The responsibility never left the one who made it. The second is for you, personally. The freedom that made evil possible is the exact same freedom that makes love possible. You cannot pull them apart. There is no version of the universe where you get to genuinely love God and also could never have refused Him. A world with no possibility of evil is also a world with no possibility of love. They come in the same box, or they don't come at all. And the third one, this is the one I actually want you to take to bed tonight. You are not a puppet. There is no chip in your head. The fact that you can walk away from God, that you can ignore Him, deny Him, shake your fist at the sky, and live like He isn't there, that is not a bug in your design. It is the highest compliment the Creator of the universe ever paid you. He made you able to leave, which means that every time you stay, every time you choose Him, it counts for something real. Your yes has weight precisely because your no was always on the table. So here's what I actually want to know from you. Do you think a world without the possibility of evil would truly be a better world? Or would it just be an emptier one? Tell me below. I read these. He made something that could break His heart. Think about how much He must have wanted the love to be real.